Hello and welcome to the Aviation Briefing with me, William Hallowell. In this podcast series, I speak with some of the biggest industry and media guests about the biggest news stories and topics in the aviation industry. Today, I'm joined by Brendan McKittrick, the CEO of Aerobloc, who says that AI combined with blockchain is the next biggest thing for the industry. It's great to have you here today, Brendan.
Thank you, William.
So let's start from the very beginning. Can you tell us a bit about what Aerobloc is and what you envisage as the future of technology within both commercial and cargo aviation as well?
Sure. Well, just to caveat that with my own background in aviation, to give it context, I was born beside an airport, and I tend to live beside airports everywhere I've been, by design or coincidence or otherwise, fascinated with the aviation industry. One of the most interesting jobs I had was a CTO of a very large company, one of the biggest providers of technology to airlines. And part of that was, working with 20 products over 350 airlines, and also including the global settlement system between ticketing between airlines, the BSP, and the SIS, the Simplified Interline System. And they had handled volumes of about $250 billion of tickets a year. So you can imagine, I said my prayers every night before bed that the system was running in the morning. Now, these are 30-year-old systems, so they're pretty much reaching end of life. Not just getting old, but they're reaching end of life. And we've seen that in the US and in Europe, where we've seen the grounding of all aircraft right across two large land masses. And that's a kind of an indication of what's to come with the technology failing in really simple ways. And what we're looking at Aerobloc is to introduce a platform which is based around principles of AI and Web3 that allow you to have a much more agile response to real world events, and allows you to have customer participation in a way where you tokenize value and so forth. And also then the use of blockchain, which allows collaboration between folks who would normally be known as competitors. And also what actually has happened in the industry in the last 30 to 40 years is we've a couple of very large operators in the middle who neither own aircraft, take responsibility for aircraft, train pilots or fly passengers. And they're big tech companies in the middle who've been very necessary. And at this stage now, they've become so large and so dominant that there's a separation between the service providers, the airlines and the airports, and the actual consumers, the flyers, the passengers. And how many of us had that situation where you're at the desk and they say, oh, you need to go back to your travel agent and fix this. You didn't book with the airline. You're kind of going, I'm kind of flying with you guys. So there's a whole connectivity, loyalty programs, a lot of good stuff that will come downstream based on the types of technologies that are promised by Web3.
So let's start firstly with commercial aviation. How would this work in terms of working for everybody, all parties included, the airports, the airlines, the OTAs, the online travel agents, and ultimately the passengers? How will it benefit those parties who work within the industry and then ultimately, the passengers at the end of it?
Okay, so I'll start with a really simple use case. So about a year ago, we decided to do what we thought was a really simple use case: landing charges. So the airport on one side, the airline on the other. Now, when a 777 lands, I would have expected, now I'm an expert in the airline side, and one of my colleagues is an expert on the airport side. And he said to me, you'd be surprised how many, incorrect invoices are sent out for actual charges for aircraft at airports. And I said, I find that hard to believe, because a 777 is pretty obvious, or an A380. But landing charges opened my eyes to how broken the systems really are, the legacy systems. So if you change an aircraft at short notice, the operational systems will know about it. Certain systems will, but certain systems won't. And often the back end and the back office systems don't get updated in real time. So invoices are sent for different aircraft tail numbers and so forth. And what we also discovered was that I think there's 137 different charges around the airport, and we bundled them all into a smart contract. So we only switched on the landing charges for the purpose of demonstration how efficient it is. Now, what did it do? We built a smart contract on a blockchain. That meant there was a single pane of truth on a distributed ledger, which was neither owned by the airport nor the airline, but they both agreed that smart contract as being a valid representation of their business. And the feed into the smart contract was a very highly curated, reliable source that would say what kind of aircraft landed, and you can feed in other things like how many passengers were on board, etc., etc. So you can formulate lots of charges. And you could even have third-party charges such as fueling, and you could even, expand that smart contract to handle that fuel is paid and so forth. I think it's in Russia. There's a Form C1. You can't fly till you actually pay for the fuel. So you have the pilot there, signing off, and then the bank has to give an approval that fuel was paid for, so the aircraft can leave. And that can all be automated very easily. So it gives you this agility that you didn't have before, where there was a lot of middlemen. Blockchain takes out the middleman. That's really what it does. And it makes life easier for everybody. And it also reconnects the service provider with the consumer directly. And it allows competitors to collaborate. So from a reservations point of view, what we have is we have a lot of aggregators in the middle who know how to assemble an offering for a passenger. Now, the industry has been struggling with this for years. When I say the industry, the airlines themselves, how do we offer something where we connect with the customer, when we give them something that's quite sophisticated, other than just a bum on a seat. Maybe they want to order certain types of food and things like that in advance. And some airlines have got around this, but typically the channel, the distribution channel is very vanilla-like. It basically says, here's a seat and there's a position on the seat when you check in, and that's it. Whereas what's really been evolving is the e-commerce model, where I'd like a lounge, the experience to go with that, and maybe other things as well around dietary preferences and so forth. So with the use of blockchain, what it allows you to do is to assemble an offering which could be multiple vendors. So it could be multiple airlines for starters. It could also involve hotels, etc., transport, you name it, and assembling that in a way that there's no dominant player. They all collaborate, and the actual offer then is made on a blockchain, which means that everybody has visibility according to their access rights, including the consumer, which is the customer. Now, you can also overlay that with insurance that says, hey, if the flight is late, you get paid this compensation. And that can be all automated by smart contracts, because the actual flight times and the landing times are pretty automated. So you can feed those into your smart contracts, and people get paid in real time into an actual wallet while they're sitting at the airport and their flight is cancelled, rather than have to apply for it months later. People could be out of cash, they might have kids with them. So you could automate the actual vouchers or tokenize the actual validity, the monetary value, or the hotel, or you could even allow people to rebook on a competitor airline, because at the end of the day, it has to be passenger centric. The passenger has to be the one who benefits for whatever options are there. So there shouldn't be, it shouldn't be, here's a voucher that you can use on our airline starting tomorrow, or here's a form to fill in so you can apply for compensation, which could take 2 to 3 months. It should be real time, and it should be automated, because obviously airlines don't stop 24/7. So there's a lot of areas where the improvement can come, and I haven't even touched on loyalty or cargo tracking. There are also areas which we're interested in.
So let's look at the current challenges with implementing this. What are they, and how do we encourage all parties to get involved in this? Because I know we spoke the last time we spoke, we kind of talked about low-cost airlines and the fact that a number of them are battling OTAs at the moment. And as you say, you have that circumstance, that scenario where the passenger gets to the airport, there's an issue with their flight, with their ticket. They go to the airline and they say, well, you booked that with the OTA. And then they go to the OTA and they also say, well, it's not our problem, you need to go back to the airline. And it always seems that the passenger is always, you say it's supposed to be passenger centric, but it always seems to be them who are, suffering as a result. So how can that be overcome? Sorry.
Yeah, the biggest obstacle is cultural right now, because I went from delivering one of the biggest delivery models around ticket settlements in the world, and basically switching, leaving the dark side to the light, saying, hey, we got to bring some of this good kit in. And what you'll have is a lot of resistance from incumbents. So part of the 20 products I had as a CTO in my previous job spanned across all different functions. So you have sort of an incumbent resistance and also an inertia in the industry, which says, well, if it's just about working with some band-aids, why change? It gets the job done. But the passenger has been suffering more and more over the years. It went from an absolute luxury service, transatlantic flights with TWA and Pan Am were quite the experience, to now when, people just need to get from A to B, and, the slightest disruption, it's a very non-resilient system. And that's why I was saying pooling, there's a lot of, you could have cancelled flights on one hand and a lot of distressed passengers, and then a lot of aircraft flying with capacity on the other hand, which is not utilized because they don't collaborate because they're competitors. But if they really want to give that experience to the passenger, they should be able to have some means of collaboration in those situations. And that can be brokered in a way where you formulate it and you call it a smart contract. So we're not here to sell blockchain or to sell AI. We're here to sell the solution it provides. But I will reference them because they do things differently than the legacy systems. Now, the legacy systems find it very difficult to talk to each other. And the industry does have a few initiatives around one order. It's kind of a way of, introducing a type of an e-commerce philosophy. You do have NDC, a new way to distribute, where you can have airlines offering through an API their tickets, where you build an actual offer on multiple legs. So those things are emerging, but they would be massively enhanced by a distributed ledger, which makes sure that nobody runs off with all the pie, and everybody is honorable and accountable, and also everyone's transactions are immutable, so they can be seen with visibility. So it's really getting back to giving the passenger the best experience. So one of the things that I mentioned there was, low-cost carriers could collaborate and have a global loyalty system, which would be, again, just tokenized. And, they could kick that off and collaborate in some way where there's a certain amount of value across even airlines. It would be a very tough notion for most people to say. That's where I'm talking about the cultural resistance. But it's actually workable. The mathematics adds up and it works, because you reward people for utilizing the industry as opposed to certain brands, and it gives a sort of a lift for the whole industry, which is always something they talk about. Now, airlines work on very marginal profits. Before COVID, I think it was about 3.5% on a $890 billion industry. And basically that 3% could be wiped out, by 2027 with, say, carbon credits and, environmentally friendly fuels, which are all in single-digit costs. So, that kind of fragile profit, you'll see a lot of airlines going out of business just based on carbon credits and CORSIA legislation that will come in 2027. So they need to find ways to get a richer ecosystem, so to get away from the vanilla seat, but give people a whole experience, which is a collaboration between airline and the airlines and the airport as well. So you have a joined end-to-end system. There is a platform out there called Camino. I don't have any personal stake or interest in it, but I think they're doing something very interesting in this space, similar to Aerobloc, with a focus on the full passenger journey. I think Lufthansa are involved, and a few other airlines have backed them. And what they're really looking to do is to use a blockchain to get everyone to collaborate in an open, transparent way. And I think they're the kind of projects we're going to start seeing emerge, like Aerobloc. And there's another one in the UK. It doesn't have a name yet, but it's looking very promising, where they have about 250 adapters which connect to the legacy systems, and then offer that on a platform where you can build very rapidly new types of applications, which allow a better user experience, really, at the end of the day.
So one thing I know that you're quite keen probably to talk about, because I know you've mentioned it before, is you mentioned tokenization, but the use of NFTs potentially for passengers. Could you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, an NFT is essentially just a digital twin of a real world asset. So it gives provenance and also ownership and so forth. So by me transferring an NFT to you from my wallet, my digital wallet, to your digital wallet, I actually transfer ownership. And the challenge to date is how do you get that NFT to be linked to the real world asset in such a way that's legal and upstanding in court. And I think that will be solved. For some things it's solved easy, but other things it's more difficult. But there's some projects here in Dubai where they have real estate projects, which are all on the blockchain. And the actual NFT, or the non-fungible token, is a representation of ownership. And the movement of that NFT from one party to another is the actual transaction of ownership in the real estate terms. Now, in aviation, there is a company called Travelex who are doing some great work with NFTs around seats. So they sell the seat as an NFT. Now, this is where Web3 gets really interesting. So in the old world, you buy a ticket, that's your seat. You know, you don't necessarily own the seat, but you do own the right to sit in that seat on a particular flight, on a particular day. And you have a P&O reference, which is your unique reference for that day, for that airline, or an e-ticket number, or whatever the way it works. It can be either or both. And with Travelex's model, you get an NFT into your digital wallet. Now, not everyone has a digital wallet. Not everyone is Web3 enabled. So this is quite new, and it's only coming downstream. And when your grandmother has a digital wallet, then that'll be mainstream, right? We're just not there yet. And I will be critical about the Web3 industry as well. It has a lot of challenges to get itself right, to get smooth. You know, the user experience or the customer experience is not there yet in its entirety. You know, setting up wallets for Bitcoin and things like that can be quite onerous, but it's just getting better all the time. So it's just a matter of time. Now, the NFTs that Travelex do, and they've launched this with an airline called Flybondi in Argentina. And when you buy the ticket, you get the NFT, but you can also resell that seat. So now you have a secondary market. So you could speculate and actually buy seats 6 months in advance, knowing there's going to be a big concert, or it's going to be, you know, around the time of the World Cup. So it's an interesting play in revenue management for the airline, because they get cash flow up front, when cash flow is wonderful. In the hotel industry, in the aviation industry, cash flow is king. And in some cases, you could do gross acquisitions of seats if the airline was up for it. They get cash flow up front. Obviously, they need to manage their cash flow continuously as well. So it's not always a good thing, but sometimes it is, because you might have a high season and a low season. And if you can bring your cash into the low season, then it allows you to operate much more efficiently. And with the NFT as well, when it's sold on the secondary market, the airline gets another uplift, because every time it's sold, they get a payment. Now, how do they get that payment? Because it's on a blockchain and it's managed by a master smart contract. Every time that NFT moves, there's automatically a payment made to the airline. So every time that ticket is sold, whether it's sold up or down, the airline gets a small percentage of that, which is not insignificant if you have a lot of seats out there. Now, the obvious challenges then are the legacy systems. I can hear a lot of people go, "Oh, but I worked on reservations." You know, you can't just switch it from Brendan to Tom and Tom to Paddy. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of checks and balances, and you know, you're trying to make sure that that you gather enough information, because we do have blacklists and international protocol around P&Ls and things like that. You know, passenger name lists. And that's what Travelex are aiming to solve. Now, at Aerobloc, what we're trying to do is to build a platform that abstracts all those kind of problems for you. So in the future, someone like Travelex wouldn't have to build all that. It's like, you know, having a mine where they want to get gold, but they got to build all the equipment before they can even open the mine. Whereas we want to, have that hardware store with all the spades and shovels and picks hanging on the wall. So you have all your ready to go building blocks to go build your Web3 solution. And we'll have adapters into the legacy systems as well to make life easy for them. So the likes of Travelex are really, they're the avant-garde, they're at the front line, breaking down all the hard walls and making the hard yard. So it's a tough slog for them, but they've done some really good stuff. So using NFTs in the future I think will be a no-brainer. At this stage, it's kind of like, NFT, what does that mean? What does that, who needs it, So there was a report by the Boston Group, consulting group, and they estimated, well, first of all, you've got about 1.6 trillion in value in the crypto system today, tokenized. And that just continuously goes up, and there's no way that's going to stop. Especially, this is a very historic day. William, I don't know if you're aware, but the EFTs for Bitcoin have been given approval by the SEC in America. So this is a big landmark day where Bitcoin becomes mainstream for the financial houses in the US. Very significant day. So what you'll see in the future is, you know, a kind of an expansion of where all of these assets and tokens can all move over to the digital world using the standards that are there. So the NFTs that are, back to the crypto value of 1.6 trillion. So Boston Consulting Group basically said, look, there's 16 trillion in real world assets that need to be tokenized so that they can be moved around in contracts and automated through AI, you know, driven systems, which are decentralized and based on blockchain and having accountability. So you've got 16 trillion to come into the system, according to Boston Consulting. And who am I to argue with them? But even if they got it half wrong, you know, there's 8 trillion of a incoming value, you know, tsunami. So this is not going to go away. It's an easy way to do business. Web3 would be the way you would start on day one. Because we're Web2, there's massive resistance. You ask the question, what are the kind of obstacles? A lot of the obstacles are really cultural, where folks say, you know, it's not going to be in my lifetime, so I'm not going to rock the boat. The systems run. I've got a lot of headaches running these old systems. Why would I try to adapt them or change them? So in parallel to Aerobloc, we're also building some applications that replace legacy systems, things like revenue accounting, which are very difficult to build. And as part of my previous job, we ran 2 of the top systems in the world, of the top 3. We basically had the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi-Cola of revenue accounting, if you want to call it that way. But they're 30-year-old products. They're coming to end of life. The people who built those systems are retiring, and in some cases actually passing away. So the knowledge has been lost. So we're going to rebuild, for example, revenue accounting, but we're going to rebuild it in a Web3 way so that it's agile. It has all the features. People can be reimbursed or paid through digital wallets if they want to. It's not imposed. It's just an option, but it's future-proofed. And it'll be AI-based, and it'll be visualized maps of the world where you can see your revenue streams, and CFOs can get really meaningful information because you have great data sets behind these systems. So the revenue accounting systems that I would have overseen in my previous job would have thousands of screens in some cases, right? So maybe 1,500 screens. And it would have a lot of data entry and a lot of data extraction, but very, very poor user interface. Now, all the data at the back of those systems is massively valuable. And if you feed that into an AI engine, it could give you some incredible insights into the history of your revenue. It may even find black spots or, you know, hot spots where your revenue has been good, or where your revenue has been bad, or where a CFO could focus their energies. So it'd be like the CFO having a team of, you know, 10 experts, analysts working through his data, giving him insights. And you could do that through automation with AI and decentralization. So there's a lot of interesting things on the horizon.
It is, you know, certainly interesting. I know you kind of say there might be some sort of hesitation to change, but I mean, I've spoken to Aerobloc, the Latvian airline, and they, you know, recently announced they're doing work with AI to kind of improve their operations and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, within the industry themselves, they do see, or some do see the potential, but you know, whether it will be rolled out with, you know, blockchain on a wider scale, I suppose that's something that you'll probably campaign for and try to answer in time to come. But let's move on slightly to sort of the cargo aspect of aviation. Mm-hmm. You know, you kind of talked about earlier ledgers and digital twins and that sort of thing. You know, in the news recently, we've had a number of concerning stories regarding airlines who have found fake parts in their planes. I would imagine that sort of thing would be prevented with the use of you know, the sort of thing that you're looking to encourage in the industry, you know, with with artificial intelligence and blockchain together.
Absolutely. I think the last time we spoke, William, that was breaking news at the time. And there was maybe 1,000 aircraft worldwide which had that potential for bogus parts. And thankfully, it hasn't matured to a disaster situation, but it can. And I have been involved in, you know, camo reviews and things like that, where there was fake parts and people had lost their lives. And it's not a nice situation. So the infiltration of bogus parts into the system is incredibly, you know, potent. Still, it's you know, it takes a lot of, you know, responsible management to stop it. but it's not technology that stops it, because there's very little around actually verifying the part. We saw that with that example, was the fact that the aircraft were still flying with bogus parts. So yeah, no, look, blockchain is not the panacea to everything, and you throw a blockchain at it and the problem goes away. That's not how it works. And there will come a day when we won't even talk about blockchain. I was on a panel yesterday where one interesting guy who had switched over from the traditional banking, TradFi to DeFi, and is now working in the ERC, 20 standard tokenized world. He basically said, look, we don't talk about being on the internet anymore, because in the future, everyone will be on the blockchain. So all data will be immutable. All data of value will be immutable, including aircraft part lineage. It's just a matter of time. And the first movers, will be the heroes to make it happen. But it won't be talked about because it will work. When you're talking about technology, it's either not working or there's a problem to be solved that's not yet solved. And that's the case as we're talking now. So I think it'll be a very boring back-end substrate. Every part that has a birth record will go onto the global aviation blockchain, which hopefully will be Aerobloc, all going well. Because Aerobloc is a digital commons. I don't own it. I am a founder, obviously, but that doesn't give me any, rightful ownership over, say, if you want to develop an application tomorrow, it's open for everybody to develop, and it's open for everyone to participate. And all the validators will be airlines and airports themselves. It won't be a centralized, data center somewhere that I control or whatever. It just can't be that way to win the trust. Now, there was a very famous blockchain experiment in sea shipping. And that failed in the end because it was very centralized, and the whole idea is to decentralize. So it's very hard for large centralized companies to get that. Even my previous companies or whatever, they're not going to feel safe, in the decentralized world till they begin to realize there's a greater sum of the parts because of the collaboration, and it's a better industry, a safer industry, and these are all good things for the end user and the consumers, which are really the people we should be providing for. Because when I step on a plane, I want to be sure there's no bogus parts on that plane. Today, I'm not. And that's not good enough. So with a global blockchain or a global distributed ledger, it doesn't always have to be a blockchain, because some distributed ledgers are not blockchains. But a distributed ledger allows everyone to participate in a supply chain in such a way that the data, you can be super confident of the data. Now, I often get asked questions about, rubbish in, rubbish out. Absolutely. If you have a way to put rubbish on a blockchain, then the blockchain just stores the rubbish, right? So you need validators, you need real world, techniques, you need real world procedures to make sure we keep those standards. And that's not hard to do, because when a part is born, it should be recorded as the birth certificate of that part. Then the lineage begins, and you can't have two of those parts going around the world. And the moment on two parts of the world in real time that there's a second identifier for that part, you have a problem, and both aircraft are immediately flagged and grounded. And you figure out which is the bogus part. So an aircraft should never take off with a bogus part, with that kind of a model where you have a way of saying, hang on a minute, I've just got a red alert on the global part tracking system. Now, that's going to take time. But what you'll see is, you'll say, the big vendors, the big providers, the Airbuses and the Boeings and so forth of this world will come together and say, hey, we need to build this. And they need a platform for that. And when they do build it in a collaborative environment, they'll adhere to whatever standards are there, but they'll have to set a few new standards. So these things take years, but they're worth doing. And it's incremental improvement. And you'll have different providers and you'll have different aircraft types, which won't go that way for a period of time, but it'll become the standard. And that's why I said at the start, all data will be immutable. Because if I give you data today, we can't really check. We're not too sure, if it's tampered with or anything like that. It's just not a concept we're at ease with. So in the future, you'll be able to prove that data is immutable by saying it came from a blockchain. And you'll have a lot of examples where I think it's Fox News have now announced they're going to use a blockchain to say that whatever clip or picture that came from Fox News, you can check the hash value to make sure that's an authentic piece. Now, whether they report the truth or not is another day's work, right? but we're always going to have flavors of opinion. But what you can verify is whether it's an authentic release from them or not. And that's a really good start. So that's where I see it going in terms of authenticity and making sure that the supply chain is watertight. It'll take time, but it's got to be decentralized and no big gorilla gets his arms around it. So it can't be bought by anybody. So nobody can capture that channel. That's where the cultural leap comes in, because that's a new concept in the capitalist world, where we're kind of getting used to decentralized now slowly but surely, where these digital commons exist, but it's going back to where we came from as a community, as a human race. We've always had community and commons. It's, you know, there's even common law in England and the use of common land and so forth for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's returning to that sort of sense of commons where we can all have utility on a common asset, where it's not just owned by one player who's obviously going to serve their own interest, but this will serve the interest of the industry, which I think is a big change, but a really good change.
Well, Brendan, unfortunately, we're out of time, but look, there is one question I'm going to have to draw an answer on from you. So you said it's only a matter of time before your vision is going to become a reality. What can you give a time span for that? Would you be willing to put maybe a number of years on that?
Yeah, we'll cut the ribbon on Aerobloc this year. By the end of this year, we'll cut the ribbon and we'll have a demonstrable platform that will be working. Then you'll have applications which will go live quicker than others. Things like loyalty programs, they're no-brainers. If you tokenize a loyalty program, you can give people actual value. So you can actually move tokens around as actual value. They can use them to buy tickets, like the Aero token we'll have native, but an airline could have its own tokens if they wish, underscored by the Aero token. And basically, they could give them to passengers to either cash out an ATM, go to a hotel, or book on a competitor airline where their own flight has been cancelled, so the passenger has the best experience. And then there's other things like tracking I mentioned for cargo. I'd probably start with collection of airlines and then spread out to others where it just becomes attractive. And there's a nudge economics where people say, hey, this is really low cost of operation. There will be things like revenue accounting, which are back-end systems that will become much more efficient and easy to run using AI and using blockchain. And then settlements between players in the industry, peer-to-peer settlements. One of the things that we didn't really touch on, but is very powerful in blockchain, is that you and I can settle peer-to-peer with absolutely zero middlemen. With a smart contract and 2 digital wallets, we can execute our business in an autonomous way where there's very few disputes. There's no foreign exchange because we're working on a crypto-based token. And then we cash out into our local fiat when we need to, but only when we need to.
Well, Brendan McKittrick, CEO and founder of Aerobloc, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, William.